Hi, welcome to the Personal History Hub. This video is all about support for the Vietnam War. Those that opposed the war in Vietnam received a lot of publicity. However, there was a significant number who actually supported the war. This also included students, ex-soldiers, anti-communists and construction workers known as hard hats. Many would turn up at rallies waving the US flag and urging patriotic support for the war. What were their reasons for supporting the war? In 1964, 85% of Americans supported the government policy in the war. Even as late as 1970, after the invasion of Cambodia, a Gallup poll showed 50% approved of the invasion and only 35% opposed it. There were a number of active and enthusiastic supporters of the war who were concerned about the spread of communism in Asia. The fear of communism in the USA had increased after the Second World War, especially with the Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe. The victory of Mao and the communists in the Chinese Civil War and the Korean War in 1950 to 1953, in which the USA intervened to support South Korea against invasion from the communist North. The USA had experienced a Red Scare of the later 1940s and early 1950s, encouraged by the activities of the Republican Senator Joe McCarthy. McCarthy insisted that communist spies were everywhere, but more especially in the State Department of the government. People were hounded out of their jobs and even put in prison. The Red Scare had lessened by 1954, but fear of communist takeovers abroad was strong. The activities of the Viet Cong and the Gulf of Tonkin incident of 1964 confirmed the fears of many Americans about the domino theory of communist expansion in Southeast Asia. Should Vietnam fall, it would be followed by countries such as Cambodia and Laos. Who were the silent majority? This was a term first used in 1967 by George Meany, the leader of labor union federations in the US. He was describing those members of unions, including himself, who supported the war as the vast silent majority in the nation. This was further publicized by Nixon in a speech he made in November 1969. Nixon believed the opponents of the war dominated the media, which gave little publicity to the many supporters of the war. He was mainly referring to the middle-aged and elderly all over America, especially those who had served in World War II, as well as many young people who eventually did serve in Vietnam. In his famous TV speech in 1969, Nixon appealed for the support of the group he called the silent majority. He meant Americans who supported his policies but did not necessarily actively campaign for it. This was a good idea, as a poll carried out over the next few days showed that 77% support for Nixon's policies in Vietnam. Letters flowed into the White House in support. After the speech, even the House of Representatives and the Senate passed resolutions approving of Nixon's conduct of the war. Nixon badly needed the support at this time, as he was trying to get North Vietnam to negotiate. The support meant that he could tell the North that despite all of the public anti-war demonstrations, he had support where it mattered, the general public and money provided by Congress. This meant that the USA was well placed to hold out for a gradual withdrawal and an honourable peace, a phrase he had been using since May 1968. Patriots and hard hats, who were they? Patriotism is the love of and loyalty to one's country. Many were taught at home and at school to obey authority and to be patriotic. Many Americans across all classes were very fiercely patriotic. To not fight in Vietnam against the wishes of the country would be seen as letting the country down and betraying what it stood for. Once the USA was in the war, patriotism drove many people to support the war, so that the USA did not look as if it was giving in to communist countries. By doing so, the US would look less powerful too. Large members in the building and construction unions supported Nixon's Vietnam policy and were nicknamed the Hard Hats. Nixon claimed they were supporting freedom and patriotism. One of the strongest supporters of the president's war policy was Peter J. Brennan. Brennan was president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, an alliance of building and construction unions in the New York City area. On the 20th of May, he led a pro-war rally outside City Hall, New York, which involved about 60,000 people. Brennan was treated like a hero by some New Yorkers and later invited to the White House by Nixon. So shortly after the Kent State University shootings, anti-war protesters announced they would hold a demonstration in order to commemorate the 4 dead students. The Hard Hats retaliated by setting up their own rally of construction workers in order to demonstrate that they supported the policies of the Nixon administration. On the morning of the 8th of May, there was a protest by students in Manhattan, New York, against the Kent State University shootings. However, about 200 construction workers attacked these students, beating up some of them with their hard hats. Witnesses suggest that the police did little or nothing to stop these attacks. More than 70 people were injured, including 4 policemen, but only 6 people were actually arrested. So, political support. White House administrations expected the support of their party when they were in power. One of the things the military complained about was that the Democrats, who had been hawks, and Johnson, because he was Democrat, became doves as soon as Nixon, a Republican, came to power. The fact that they were round the party in opposition to the president seemed to encourage them to do this. However, this was balanced against the fact that no politician wanted the USA to look as if it had been defeated by the communist North Vietnam. Those who wanted to end the war did not want South Vietnam to become communist. Political support and opposition was complicated because politicians wanted different things all at the same time. They wanted to end the war, they wanted to do what would make them popular and win votes of power. They did not want the USA to seem to be losing. Support within Congress. Support for the war in Congress did shift over time. So the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964 was passed unanimously in the House of Representatives, and with only 2 votes against in the Senate. This clear support of increased US involvement in the war was made partly as a reaction to the supposed attack on the 2 US ships. It was also passed because Congress had no idea how much had really been spent in supporting the South Vietnamese government up to that point. As time passed, Congress generally became less favourable to the war and kept on funding it, even though it knew the real cost. There were 2 main reasons for this. One was that the military kept assuring the government that victory was close. 2, they did not want the USA, a rich and powerful country, to be beaten by North Vietnam. Reactions in Congress shifted after events such as the Tet Offensive or speeches such as Nixon's silent majority speech. Congress was also influenced by public opinion. Simply put, it was more likely to express anti-war sentiments if there had recently been a large, peaceful anti-war demonstration. However, when anti-war demonstrations became violent, Congress tended to shift more towards being pro-war. After 1970, Congress put restrictions on how much money could be spent during the war. The next video is going to be on the Nixon Doctrine.